Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another session of Asian Pathfinders. Today, we are really honored to have S Kiran Kumar sir as our pioneer. Everyone knows that we are holding these pioneer series, and we have Narayan Prasad as the moderator. The first 5 minutes, approximately, I'll just give you a brief introduction and the housekeeping rules. Then I'll pass on to Narayan to introduce sir, and then for sir to give his remarks. So, I'll just share my screen. So, like I said, okay, I am. So, so today's topic is space development and its socio-political implications. Before we start the session, just a brief about Asian Pathfinders. We are a knowledge-sharing platform where we aim to bring scholars, practitioners from various fields together to have these multidisciplinary approach and discussions and dialogues, and also give that open space for researchers as well as practitioners, be it from the private sector, public sector, to have these discussions, because we also really do believe in multidisciplinary discussions and dialogues. That's how we further, because our world is really interlinked. So my colleague Shreyas and I, one of the reasons why we co-founded this was to have this kind of a multidisciplinary dialogue. So the next two sessions, this is part of the Pioneer series, which we've been holding for the last 3 weeks now. This is our third week. So we've had Dr. Anil Kakodkar to kick off the proceedings. After that, we had Dr. Wali Hattan, and today we have S Kiran Kumar sir speaking on India's space development. Our next session is going to be on the Indian education sector, and I think with the new education policy, and I think this would be very important. We have Dr. Shrikant Paranspe speaking on it, and then we have N. Satyamurthy speaking on the current state of Indian journalism, which is currently a very hot topic for discussion. So I'm really looking forward to it. Definitely the community guidelines. Shreyas will be posting it in the chat, but just to go over it, just ask your questions and comments in the chat section. We do encourage everyone to be open about what their views, but respect the views of others also. Respect intellectual property. We record these sessions, we put them on YouTube for your future references. But if you want to use anything that's said here, which should be attributed to the speakers or the moderator, reach out to us. We'll be happy to put you in touch for you to get the permission. And obviously, just let's use parliamentary languages, the ones that are actually supposed to be parliamentary. But yeah, how do you reach us? I am Pallavi, my colleague Shreyas. You can find us on social media, as well as these are email addresses, and you can always look up Asian Pathfinders also. We are on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, definitely. So today's session, I'll leave it to Narayan to introduce sir, but just a brief about Narayan. He's a co-founder and COO of SatSearch.co, a global market space for space. It's based in Netherlands. He's the partner to Space Park Kerala, a Government of Kerala initiative to develop a dedicated space activities hub in India. He's also served previously as an associate research fellow at the European Space Policy Institute. He has authored over 75 articles in various national and international publications, and he has been educated in India, Germany, Sweden, and France. He's currently joining us from Germany, Berlin, and he has been the awardee for Emerging Space Leaders by the International Astronautical Federation, and he's the elected member of the International Institute of Space Law. And definitely check out his podcast. It's called New Space India. So over to you, Narayan, now. So to introduce her and kick off the proceedings.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Pallavi. So it's an honor and privilege to introduce, S Kiran Kumar sir. He is had an illustrious career in the Indian Space Research Organization. He's currently a Vikram Sarabhai professor at ISRO in Bangalore, and he's also a member on the Space Commission and a governing council member of the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. He's served as the Secretary of Department of Space and Chairman ISRO during 2015 and 2018. Born in 1952 in Karnataka, he's had a physics honors degree from Bangalore in 1971 and an MTech degree in physical engineering from Indian Institute of Science in 1975, again from Bangalore. He is, of course, pioneered and been present in the development and design of over 50 electro-optical payloads that have flown in space, starting from the Bhaskara TV payload in 1979 to payloads on board the Mars orbiter mission in 2013. So he's played also a very crucial role in Chandrayaan-1, from conceptualization to the then the success of Mars orbiter mission and the reusable launch vehicle technology demonstrator mission. So apart from all of this, he's been the chair of the Committee on the Earth Observation Satellites in 2012, made a lot of valuable contributions to the coordination group on meteorological satellites, expert on satellite systems, World Meteorological Organization, and the Indo-US Joint Working Group on Civil Space Cooperation. Shri S Kiran Kumar is also the president of the Aeronautical Society of India, fellow of the National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Sciences, Indian Society for Remote Sensing, and several of them here. He's been conferred with several DSCs and honoris causa by 18 academic institutions in India, and over 85 publications published in national and international scientific journals, conferences, and symposiums. He was conferred Padmashri in 2014 by Government of India, and several other awards, that has a very long list. And he has, of course, been a very prestigious recipient of the 2018 International Von Karman Wings Award by the Aerospace Historical Society, and also the Chevalier Léordre National de Légion Honneur from the government of France in 2019. With that being said, this is a very illustrious career, and we would love to hear his insights on this particular topic, which is a very important topic. So the floor is for you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Narayan Prasad, for the introduction, generous introduction. And also, let me compliment the Asian Pathfinders for organizing this program of trying to reach out to the people, linking with those who have done some work in the various areas. Only one question was the name of the activity itself is a fireside chat. So now we are all in the COVID situation in our houses, and there is no fireside here for the chat. But that apart, anyway, let me compliment them for carrying out this particular activity and giving me an opportunity to share with the people the way India has dealt with this activity of space program and how it has impacted social and political activities in the country. So thanking you for this opportunity, and the good morning to all the participants. What I intend to do is initially for maybe about 10 minutes, I'll just speak on what has happened in the space program in India, how it has moved, and where we stand today. And then subsequently, probably we can have question answer as moderated by Narayan Prasad. In fact, incidentally, just yesterday we completed the birth centenary year celebrations of whom we consider as the father of the Indian space program, Professor Vikram Sarabhai. And as many of you may be aware, Vikram Sarabhai was the person who visualized how a technology like space can be utilized for the rapid development of a country, a developing country like India. In fact, if you see, when the first object was put into space by the Russians way back in '57, India was a fledgling democracy which has come out of colonial rule and other rules for hundreds of years, and then it was just trying to organize itself, develop, and come out of poverty and various developmental issues. And at that time, it was Dr. Sarabhai who visualized that technology of space, by going out beyond the Earth, by putting satellites in orbit in different heights, you can do various activities which will be beneficial for the development in the country. You can imagine at that time, just 10 years after independence, if the government had to be convinced that a technology like space, which was being done by the two superpowers at that point of time, mostly for showcasing their military strength and demonstrating who is more powerful, who is more capable. And at that time, visualizing that use of such a technology can make a difference to the country, because what he had in vision was bringing in communication capability, remote sensing capability, and then using these two features, how to make sure that in India, you can reach out to the entire countrymen across the different regions which are not easily accessible. And probably many of you are also familiar that if you put a satellite in geostationary orbit at a height of 36,000 kilometers, it acts like a tower at that height. And 1/3 of the globe it can continuously see. And so by virtue of that, you can establish line of sight communication between Earth and the satellite. So what Dr. Sarabhai did was he convinced his friends across the globe, Americans, Russians, then Germans and French people. And then he convinced them that in India, we have a unique place called geomagnetic equator. And if upper atmospheric research is conducted in that place, the entire scientific community will be benefited. And in that form, he could bring the sounding rockets in the form of kits, assemble them in Tumba, our equatorial rocket launching site. And there, the first launch took place in 1963. And in doing that particular testing also, he had to actually convince the fishermen in that region that you need to vacate this place for us to conduct these experiments. And then he also told them, with the help of a priest of the church in that place, that if you vacate this place and allow these experiments to be done, one day in future, the country will benefit. Just as though to demonstrate this particular aspect, India was able to provide to the fishermen in our long coastline of 7,500 kilometers specific information using the color of the ocean observed from the satellites, and then through that chlorophyll, and then through that the food chain of the fish, and then identifying where the fisherman needs to go for capturing their fish. And this information is being disseminated by Indian National Center for Ocean Information System in Hyderabad from 1999 onwards. And this provides to the fishermen specific information using space technology. And to this capability, what was added after we brought in our navigation satellite was today a small gadget which is battery operated, is fitted in the boat of the fisherman. And this communicates with the Navig satellites and locates the boat. And not only that, through Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, it communicates with the handheld device in the hands of the fisherman. And this particular ability enables the fisherman in the form of a video compass, directs him when he is in the ocean, where to go. And not only that, an app on the mobile enables the fisherman to get specific information in his mother tongue on any weather vagaries that could occur if in the coming days sea state roughness is going to be very heavy, or it's going to be cyclonic or wind storms, etc., so that it alerts him. Not only that, if he is anywhere near the international boundary, then also it gives an alert to him. So you can see in this one example, a person who does not know reading or writing is getting the benefit of the most advanced technology of rocket, satellite, instruments built on that, and applications. So this is one of the aspects. And then in the early days, what was also done was India conducted the world's largest socio-technological experiment of making use of an advanced satellite built by Americans, borrowed for about a year, and using that borrowed satellite in about 2,400 villages in our country way back in 75, using technology similar to today's direct-to-home television, the reach was established and direct-to-community sets were built, and India conducted the world's largest socio-technological experiment. And through this, the government was convinced that space technology is the way to establish communication and broadcasting in the country. Otherwise, the alternate technology at that time would have been terrestrial microwave towers every 1 kilometer. And then you can imagine 3.25 million square kilometers of the country would have needed a huge amount of the infrastructure, cost, and all that. Then beyond that, in terms of teleconnectivity, it was established. Then meteorology, by looking at the image data over India and its surroundings and providing it to the weather forecasting community, today you are able to actually forecast when the cyclone hits a particular location in our long coastline and enable the disaster relief agencies to evacuate the people and save their lives. Where today in super cyclone occurrences, the loss of life is reduced to single digit, which used to be in the range of tens of thousands of people in the earlier decades. Then today, by virtue of the technology that is developed in the country of launch vehicles, starting from a simple sounding rockets in the form of kits, today we have 3 versions of the launch vehicle, which again has gone through a lot of geopolitical influences, and the activity itself, as you can imagine, because the dual use nature, a lot of restrictions are there. So when you are developing the technology, you do not have access to many of the things. But then even in the presence of such restriction, the India was able to actually do in almost self-reliant manner, establish a capability to build launch vehicles, then build satellites, and then build instruments. And using that, today, a large number of applications but are done by state and central government departments. And then whether it is for monitoring or for planning activities, the state and central government departments use of this technology in terms of geospatial technology. If you can visualize, it has actually penetrated all aspects of human life. And today, whether it is surface water mapping of the country or identifying what is going to be the crop yield in major crops. And then when there was restrictions, developing the cryogenic technology itself totally indigenously. When one superpower was ready to provide the technology, another superpower ensured that it did not happen. Then all these kinds of constraints existed. Not only that, there was also the constraints of, you can say, the resources. India being a developing country, the amount of resources it can put on the space technology was actually limited. And in spite of all this, today what ISRO has demonstrated is it is possible to do the activities in a very different way, in a manner in which you can make the best use of the technology for the capabilities of our country, for the requirements of our country. Not only that, today if you look at in terms of science, what India has done, it has shown to the world that we can do planetary or interplanetary missions in a manner very different from what others have done, and also do international collaborative activity. Chandrayaan-1, if you take, it was an excellent example of how technology development could bring in a large number of countries together. And even in the area of science and technology, Chandrayaan-1, though man had already landed on moon, a number of probes had gone around the moon, gets the credit for discovering the presence of water molecules on the moon. Similarly, when the Mars mission was done, the manner in which it happened brought in a view, the entire world started looking at the country. And similarly, as part of our developmental activities, while we were trying to gain some revenue from the technical capability of launching satellites, 104 satellites which was launched in one go. And then if you look at satellites like AstroSat, which is again making a huge impact even scientifically, today it has performed an activity which is very unique. Even bigger satellites like Hubble are actually having some difficulty in establishing observation in particular deep UV wavelength. This satellite today carries the world's highest angular resolution telescope and is able to make a new observations and provide new inputs to scientific community. Now, even today, the government is also trying to make use of it in space diplomacy. For example, South Asia satellite, if you look at, true to our own heritage, that the knowledge and skills you acquire should be used for the benefit of the entire humanity. South Asia satellite was an example where India provided the transponder capability to our neighboring countries to make use of it for various activities. So in this manner, today what India has done so far is build a technological capability of launch vehicles, satellites, instruments, applications, and showcase that all this can be done specifically to address various problems in the country, whether it is education, telemedicine, or day-to-day monitoring, or planning and navigation. In all these areas it has shown. And today, currently, what the government is trying to do is, in fact, the technological capability of space, if you have see, we are among the few countries in the world who have this end-to-end capability. And this technological capability should also be able to be utilized in the country by the people of the country, the entrepreneurs, and the various institutions to be a part of the space economy. Space is going to be, is actually the fourth frontier, and you are already seeing ventures in people venturing into space tourism, space adventure, space exploitation, and then using the asteroids, etc., for mining and other activities. So space is the fourth frontier, like land, ocean, and air. The enterprise is growing beyond that. So what the government is trying to do is, how can we leverage this capability that has been built in the country? How more and more institutions and entrepreneurs can be enabled to be part of the space technology and be part of the space economy, which is expected to be almost $400 billion in a couple of years. How to make it happen? So it is in this context that today what the technological capability that has been demonstrated, but what is needed is capacity. More and more of the requirements to be established, and more resources are needed, more talent is needed. That's how the country is growing. So in what I would stop at this point and just summarizing again in a nutshell what the Dr. Sarabhai had envisioned, how to make use of the space technology for developmental activities in the country, and having reached a certain stage, today looking at how we can be part of the space economy and how we can take advantage of the intrinsic capabilities that have been built in. And with this, I'll stop and then we'll get into chat mode, and I'm ready to answer to the best of my capability the questions that are going to come. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you very much, sir, for those opening comments. I think it sets a lot of context for the conversation. So you did talk about several of the applications and how they are evolving. From what I have seen so far, ISRO is building a lot of the technology, but in a country like India, you have to rely on states and other institutions which are servicing the citizens to actually take up those applications to benefit their jurisdiction or their so on. So we have seen, for example, BBMP or many other institutions come up and ask ISRO for these applications and user applications. So how do you foresee this challenge of convincing more government institutions who are directly dealing with government citizen services to take up space-based services, in terms of one, capacity building in them to know that there is a space capability that they can use? And can you also maybe perhaps give this, you had organized this meet in 2015 with 1,500 officials, and there was news that 170 projects were identified during that meet. Can you please give any updates on these regards?
Yeah, in fact, what you are saying is a very important aspect. See, as the technology of space was very new, and then when India got into the use of the space technology, there were always the questions of whether India should be looking at the use of this technology, etc., etc. But then one of the key thing is how to make use of this technology for addressing specific problems as always the issue. And unless it is adopted by the user, the person, a group, which is going to make use of the technology, it's always this particular aspect of trying to bring in the user at a very early stage in the whole of the project. And this is where, again, the whole, you can say, the approach of ISRO with the pioneers like Dr. Sarabhai, Satish Dhawan, etc. had been how to link these people. Very early, the whole activity of Professor Satish Dhawan had organized a meeting across the various government departments and then trying to bring in and showcase how the technology can be used. And then over the period, what ISRO has been trying to do is convince more and more departments. It's not an easy thing. I'll give you a couple of examples. While in the meteorology area, it was very quickly adopted, and then use of meteorological data was started getting into the usage by IMD for both forecasting, cyclone, etc., etc. There were in areas, again in forestry, the Department of Ministry of Forestry started using it for establishing the biennial, once in 2 years, state of the forest in the country, establishing that. And then in terms of, if you look at, for example, in crop field assessment and crop forecasting, ISRO had to almost do this activity on its own for almost 3 decades, 3.5 decades, before the Department of Agriculture and the Welfare established its own center, Mahalanobis Crop Forecasting Center. Today in 2012, it got established and it is now doing on a regular basis. So it has always been a process and a difficult mechanism where convincing the people, see, normally you can easily visualize, suppose I come to you, you are doing some job, and then I try to explain to you what you are doing today, you can do in a different manner by using this new technology. Naturally, the first reaction of a human being will be, who is this fellow to tell me? I know my job better, I have done this. So there is an intrinsic, you can say, hesitancy in accepting new things. So that is where space technology being very new, the problem was there. So continuously the effort was going on. And the activity, what you mentioned, actually the credit for that we should really give to our Honorable Prime Minister, because when he was the Chief Minister in Gujarat, he actually made use of both communication and remote sensing in many of the planning activities in Gujarat. And also there was a center called BISAG established, where one of the ISRO person was moved over there as a director. And then he was aware of how space technology can be utilized in various government activities. So what we did in 2015 was bringing in all the secretaries of various state and central government departments, and based on a series of activities, we set up about 28 teams in ISRO, worked with each of the departments, looked at what they are using space technology for and what more they can do. Based on that, that particular day's event was conducted, wherein many of the secretaries tried to showcase what they can use it for. And on that day, the Honorable Prime Minister spoke extempore for 45 minutes to tell the secretaries how space technology can make a difference to the governance, to the planning, monitoring. In fact, that gave a big boost, and almost subsequent to that, lot of work, we established more working relationship with the department, and it is continuously going on. Today, for example, if you take Manrega, where the government spends tens of thousands of crores, the ISRO has been able to work with NIC and government departments. And today, Bhuvan hosts as a platform all the activities that are going on in Manrega gets registered, and government gets to know the whole set of activities. And then it's also able to use it both in AI and ML activities in terms of planning. For example, if you are doing a water recharging structure, which is the right place to do, or simply anywhere if it is done, what is the impact? All these kinds of things are going on. But beyond all this, no matter how much is the effort you are doing, the government departments and the people available in the government are still limited. It's only when more and more academic institutions, the student groups, and the entrepreneurs are penetrating and pour over the huge amount of data that exists, using that data, convert them into decision making and more specific information for the decision makers, it becomes beneficial. It is in this area that the success has been there, but limited, but lot more can be done. That is where making the data accessible, available, where the conflict between security and various departments, the tussle was causing the problem. And hopefully in the coming days and weeks and months, these are going to be actually made more and more accessible, so that both the student community, research community, and the entrepreneurs will be able to really play a big role in providing specific solutions based on actual scientific and technical knowledge. As we can easily visualize, suppose you are the person who is in charge, an executive, you are now actually trying to do firefighting. You are trying to solve the problems yesterday or day before yesterday. So you have time constraint. So if you are actually given an option, these are the solutions possible, this gives you these advantages with these penalties, you will be making an informed decision. So it is in this context that efforts like technology builders, technology utilizers have the responsibility of enabling the executive to understand the scenario better and provide them better options so that they can do informed decisions.
So the follow-up question I had was around the capacity, building and information that can trickle down to citizens that gives a broad overview as to what is the fruits of the space program, because there is of course a lot of the direct interactions that you and others have to convince people that there are these benefits that are coming out, but it would be also interesting to see if there is a kind of open information on to what level or to what extent all the benefits are trickling down according to region wise, because the mandate of every state and every region, as I said, the jurisdiction is independent. So, and also it perhaps creates a little bit of competition between states or between departments to also use space technology in a way that that benefits them. So to this end, it trickles back to the idea that then there's a case for space to get more and more investment by the government. And the second part is that you also convince people who are naysayers saying that, we shouldn't be investing in space and should be investing in somewhere else, to also, demystify this argument for them. So, do you see these efforts taken up by ISRO in the future by mapping all of this information and providing more and more information on how broadly the adoption has been, and in every single program that addresses every single community, and what is the way forward here?
This is again another very important aspect, and again it's an aspect which is actually constrained both in terms of manpower and resources. See, if you see, just to give you an idea, for example, when a lot of comparison happens with respect to International Space Agency doing such reaching out, etc., etc. If I were to tell you that the entire money ISRO has spent right from its inception, even after adjusting for the value of money, the total money is less than a 1 year's expenditure of an advanced country, then you can see the constraint that exists. Many of the things that we need to do is definitely, if you have to reach out and bring out and tell the people, both the new generation and the current generation, significant amount of time and effort and resources are required for that. And today, ISRO, by virtue of its the overwhelming load that it has in meeting the current activities, and then making more and more. Anyway, this is a problem, but notwithstanding that, our effort should be how to make it happen. So toward this, what has been done is, for example, in last 1 year, under the Vikram Sarabhai centenary year celebration, there were these mobile vans, and then which went around the country, different parts, and then trying to reach out, tell to the extent that's possible. Then also we have in Hyderabad, in JD Metla, there is a center which is established, where within the campus, any academic institution, students and researchers can come and work there. They have free access to data, all the data that is collected by ISRO, and they also have access to doing some development of software. For example, one student group made use of these capabilities and came up with a mobile-based app for actually linking the needy of food with the sources of food, etc. A lot of such geospatial technology things. And then today we have Bhuvan platform for many states. And we have also actually in Bangalore, for example, Bangalore Center conducts in Kannada language every year for the school students, based on their use of Bhuvan platform data, conducting projects, then based on the project they get awards, etc., etc. See, in all these things are happening, but for a country of our size and our reach, it's a minuscule thing. So the really, again, the problem comes back to the resources that we are able to provide. And this is one of the major constraints. Though the desire is there, though the need is there, many times it's the resource that puts a constraint. But notwithstanding this, we are encouraging the people, for example, the staff of the ISRO itself, we are encouraging them to go to their home places where they have learned their school and then try to showcase there when they go there in their holidays. So in different ways we are attempting, but finally it boils down to the resources that are available.
Yeah, and that is, of course, a large part of this debate, and especially when you look at, for example, the evolving security situation in India, and given the talk is about the socio-political context, and recently the government has taken a decision to also branch into defense space with the creation of the Defense Space Agency and Defense Space Research Organization. Since India, was one of the only countries that had a very civilian approach to beginning the space program and evolving it for the last 50 years. Do you think that by branching out into defense space separately and keeping civil space separately, the budgets for the entire space activity becomes much larger, because defense always gets much larger budgets than any other activity normally in the country? So do you see, like, the defense space evolving in a way that it gets a large budget which will allow more and more applications and more opportunities evolve in the sector?
Yeah, see, if you really look at how the technology development globally has happened in terms of access for people to do research and then money available for doing research, etc. Internationally, it is only the defense activities which have spurred the spending of money by the various Western countries, and it is the trickle-down effect of this money which is available to researchers, whether it's in academic institutions or even private enterprises, etc., which are happening internationally. In India, like the way the whole activity started, and because you are coming out of a colonial rule, and then the way the government started looking at the development, the corresponding scenario of the money that is being spent in the defense sector was, much of it was not happening within the country for various reasons. I don't think we need to get into that aspect. But then what we are telling today, as a country grows, as it becomes economically stronger and stronger, and also as it needs to protect itself, these are essential things which are going to happen. There is no way India can avoid getting into this use of space for ensuring that it is able to protect itself. For example, if one of the countries is trying to make use of it for all the advantages it can take from that, others cannot remain mute spectators. They also will have to do sufficiently to protect themselves, because one of the basic things is a country requires its own to protect itself. And then when others have, while originally the idea of space was the common heritage of the humanity, and it was not to be used for military purposes or for those kinds of activities, but then the human behavior, if you look at it, is might is right, is always the scenario. Those who have the capability will dictate. And then those who are trying to make use of Britain, like you have an Air Force, Army, if you are going to have a Space Force, then you are also forced to do certain things. So in this context, what happens is, while the last 4 to 5 decades, India was able to make the best use of the space technology from the civilian domain, but it's also now required to address the problems it is facing and spend more and more on these activities. Now, the Atmanirbhar Bharat is where the defense expenditure might see more components spent in the country, and through that provide more opportunity both for the industry and academia to get a share of that money. Yeah, because if you are not doing your own original research, you will always be a follower and you can never come up with a newer thing. So that's an essential thing. And in that area, the COVID, what it has done is it has also changed the mindset of a large number of people who actually make decisions and their thinking process. They also realize that it is important that a country like ours need to have some original areas where we can go ahead. Otherwise, what we have been able to show is, in spite of the constraints that exist in resources or technology, in all those areas where your intellectual power is involved, you have done better than rest of the places and taken advantage of that and moved ahead. But then that will allow you to go only that some distance. If you really want to go beyond that, and if you want to establish yourself as a person who can come up with a very different ways of doing things, it requires more expenditure within the country in the process of enabling this expenditure, which is inevitable. Your protection is an important thing. But then if we are able to actually spend more and more of that within the country, then India is going to benefit. I'm sure all these thought processes are going on right now in the people who matter. And COVID, in a way, has changed the complete global scenario, global political scenario. And then it makes people realize that while globe has become shrunk and has become a collaborative effort, but it also has to cater to itself in the times of certain crisis. It should be able to withstand all this.
We have a very interesting question by a professor from a university saying, how can universities, be more involved in proposing end-to-end missions for research? Because we do have some student-led missions with student satellites and the RESPOND program, which are the academic interfaces. But we have not seen institutions in India or research or universities propose end-to-end scientific missions in a way that is done in, through other satellites like GRACE or other examples in Europe or other places. So do you have any thoughts on this as to how scientific, professors and, researchers in Indian universities can propose end-to-end missions and can get support?
Yeah, I think this is a very important aspect. See, like what I was trying to tell, today what we see is a result of what has happened in the past. But then from now, what has to happen in future, we have to come up with different ways of doing things than what has happened. And that is where, see, one of the things I used to keep telling people was, if we go by what has happened yesterday as the yardstick for tomorrow, there would be no tomorrow. The tomorrow will be there only because there are people who want to think differently, who think beyond the limitations that existed. So while many of the people who are in this area try to look for similar mechanisms which existed elsewhere, and then how it happened. There it happened because, like we were saying, the total amount of money that was spent in academia and institutions was huge, trillions of dollars in the Western world. But whereas India never had such an opportunity to do. But then today, in spite of all that, we have reached a stage where there is a technological capability that exists. But then now it is for the academic institutions and the group to visualize, come up with an end. If you are looking for a new way of solving a particular problem, there is enough general source information. Based on that, coming up with an idea. And then today the government is also trying to see how certain projects can be actually funded at various levels, both within ISRO and as well as the DST and even defense, etc. Now, our ability to actually convince any of these segments or even split the problem what we have in hand to try and get funding from this. So it is this act, and this is the area where we need to do more and more, you can say, thinking process and arrive at mechanisms where an end-to-end solution which can be brought in by the rigor of academic discussion and then converting it into a new way and economic way and a way by which we can get the resources from the various government and non-government entities. This is a real challenge, And this is where in the coming days, more and more effort is required. And today, if you look at already some, for example, the company is now building satellites in hyperspectral sensor and is trying to get it launched. So this has all happened outside space agency. So opportunities are there. In fact, one of the institutes, even for quantum communication, has started a program which is getting support. And one of the entrepreneurs is getting funding from ISRO on a program which ISRO itself is not doing. So all these are happening. But then it is for us to convince the people that matter that what idea I have is worth doing. That is where the effort is required. And opportunity exists, and it is for us to work towards that.
So there's a lot of new technologies like machine learning, artificial intelligence, quantum communication, so many new areas that are emerging and merging with the space technology itself. So, a lot of the work, of course, will be taken up by ISRO itself. But how do you see, the new generation of either entrepreneurs or, academics involved in these activities to participate with ISRO in these new technologies?
Yeah, as probably you're aware, in terms of human space program, ISRO made an announcement of opportunity where almost 18 to 20 specific activities are given an opportunity for academia, entrepreneurs, etc. What you will see is more and more such things when even a specific problem which ISRO wants to solve, that problem itself will be posed as an announcement of opportunity, and then based on the proposals coming from the industry and entrepreneurs or even academia identifying. So ISRO will get into more and more such problem statements and then getting solutions to those problems, doing seed funding. And then if you look at, we established a capacity building program office, which is now trying to establish across the country, different places where certain minimum laboratory facilities are provided, and also linking the local academic institutions and entrepreneurs to come together, work on that. So ISRO is also trying to find different ways of working with that. What will succeed, how it will succeed, will depend on how the responses come. And again, find also the amount of money that can be spent on this. But then effort is full swing, it is there. Even ISRO has also announced academic partnerships in terms of new areas of technology. So in those areas, it's identifying one particular academic institution as a partner. And in that area, what is expected is all the things research that's happening globally can be part of their assessment. They can actually bring in new information, even train people within ISRO. So what we are trying to do is, because see, this knowledge is no one person's or no one group's actually prerogative. It can come from any different places. So the mechanisms for that, what it is trying. So one is what ISRO is trying to do today is make more and more specific problems as announcement of opportunity, even in mission, space science mission, whether it is Venus mission or Mars mission, there also it is asking. Actually, we are not getting many times sufficiently complete proposals like what you talked about, end-to-end mission. If such a proposal comes, we'll be definitely quite happy to look at that. But what we are finding it is, of course, many of these things would have been because of what has happened. If you look at a space science mission, until we had our Chandrayaan, AstroSat, and then ExpoSat or even Aditya, etc. Even the academic people would have thought in India there is not much opportunity, there is no committed space program, etc. But today, by virtue of what has happened, we are providing an observatory. Any academic institution group can actually task the satellite for a project of theirs. So the efforts are on, but then we need more open-minded effort from the other side also to accept that ISRO is not something which has got an infinite resource and it can meet everybody's proposals. It has its limitation, but it's trying to work out of that limitation and come on.
Yes, when you review the industry base in India that works with ISRO, often there's a lot of support from ISRO by providing them the handholding, allowing them to know how space hardware is done. And over the last for 30, 40 years, all these vendors have primarily been dependent on ISRO for their orders. But today I think there's a very real opportunity for them to mature, to be able to do business abroad and do a lot of exports. And especially, given the context of this Atmanirbhar Bharat and other new programs that are evolving, how do you see what do you think that the vendors must do to do more export and do more business internationally, and not just solely depend on ISRO and the taxpayer money within India?
Yeah, actually, this is one of the things what you are saying is what current effort of in space or what the government is trying to do, because capability is one thing, capacity is another thing. So what was done in the recent past, if you see, look at what ISRO was trying to do itself, was to make sure, see today probably we have about 50 plus satellites for various activities. What we need is probably more than 2 or 3, even 3 times this number to really meet the requirements of the country in various areas. Now, this is where we are trying to actually make sure that the industry is able to do. But then here, the real issue is the industry actually, this is a business which is a very risky business, and it is not easy to make the huge amount of, you can say, profit in a short term. You need to look at this in a long-term perspective and then be prepared to take very risky decision and stick to what you have to do. This is where one of the key problems that come in the industry related to space. And even if you look at Elon Musk, for example, though he had a deep pocket, if the 5th one or the 4th one, what he was attempting had failed, whether he would have continued in this process is a question mark. See, because the first few failures which occurred. So this is where the real problem for the entrepreneurs is their ability to survive the risk and the difficulties that come and see the fruits of their labor beyond certain point. This is one real issue which is always going to be there. And today, the more and more the entrepreneurs are looking maybe for short-term gains, short-term successes. If within that it can happen, it will work. So that is why it's a difficult area. But notwithstanding that, it's the human nature. There are people who are ready to take such risks and go beyond. And when they're ready to do that, probably they will succeed and then they'll go ahead. The real issues are two, according to me. One is their preparedness for not succeeding for quite some time and then being ready for a long-term, you can say, non-profitable activity and then beyond some time profit. Then another thing is there are also probably some areas where you can make quick profit, but there are other areas where you will make over a period of time. So this you have to balance. And the effort is providing numbers. See, earlier, India itself was not able to provide sufficient number to the industry. So that's how probably last few years, we were able to show, yes, there are sufficient numbers for the investment you make, you can get return, because the quality requirements and the zero failure requirement put a constraint on the system. This also as a philosophy is changing. Today, when you are looking at large number of satellites, you are ready to accept few satellite failures because as a percentage, you are ready. So you are rethinking on your testing philosophy, etc., and making it more cost effective. So the whole scenario is changing. And here, yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, sir. Just to interrupt there. Recently, the defense, for example, has created a negative import list, which allows people to invest locally and to create those technologies and the products here in India. So given that, about, I think, from the recent statements I've read, about 20% of the launch vehicle components and a few more percentage of the spacecraft components are being imported by India for the space missions as well. Do you foresee ISRO taking such steps that they will create such a import negative list to encourage local firms to also produce them with the support of ISRO?
No, I probably see what would be happening is like what you are saying. What the general idea of the government at this point of time is do more and more of commercial activities in the commercial domain. That means, if, for example, when you are talking about more launch vehicles to be available for launching, if all this activity is going to be done in the industry, now the industry will have the freedom to do, making it more cost effective, making it doer. And as far as the ISRO itself is concerned, its effort will be to develop newer technologies, newer capabilities. See, if you really look at the problem of cost effectiveness on the activity what we talked about, whether you want to put a particular thing, in the defense domain it is different because there the numbers etc. are quite different. The economics of doing that is much more amenable for such a thing compared to what you are talking about in ISRO. And here the components, what you would be looking for is, while you don't want you want to get into a situation where somebody can take you for a ride, or you can say almost blackmail you for a program, such a situation you don't want. That means you should have at least more than one source from which you can get. If more than one source is available for that small component, if you have to establish the complete thing, monetarily it's going to be a very problematic thing. What ISRO has always been trying to do is work on those areas where developed technology, whether it's material processing, etc., etc. It has tried to make the best use of the accessible technology, and what is not accessible it is doing. It will continue to do in that fashion. But then as a country, when you are looking at, probably there are going to be some changes. As a country, certain things, the new mechanisms will enable more in terms of electronic components, etc. There would be a different approach, which as a country it will take. It will not be from ISRO per se.
So I don't know how much time you have. We have a lot of questions. Do you still have maybe 5 or 10 minutes to stretch, or
another 10 minutes is okay? Yeah, another 10 minutes is okay.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions on the emerging space startups in India and a lot of investment, even some of the launch vehicle startups that have emerged out of India at this point of time. So how do you foresee any programs specific, from ISRO to either support them, or will it mostly be around the policy aspects and providing them a policy prerogative to either use the launch base or many other things? Would it be that, or will you also look at some sort of instruments like, let's say, NASA or ESA, where they have joint funding instruments or something like that for some of these startups to mature from India?
Yeah, there are two parts. One, I told, for example, ISRO is likely to look at more and more activities to be done, even the few developmental and R&D activities to be done in the industry. So for that, definitely some more expenditure than what has been happening is likely to be one scenario. That means this is one place where some additional funding is going to happen. And the second area where it's likely to happen will also be in terms of the enabling some of the entrepreneurs and the people to convert many of the technologies into not only space use and non-space use thing, where the industry is able to showcase that by taking up this particular technology, they have a business case, they can make money out of it, etc., providing more and more such opportunities. Here also what is likely to happen is there will be two steps. See, when an activity is done within the organization, it is done primarily with the purpose of addressing the specific problem we have. But then that methodology can be adaptable and provide a very good solution to the problems that somebody else is facing. And this part of the activity, we expect that industry or the entrepreneurs to do more and more. Access to what has been done will be there, and converting it to a manufacturable or processable thing could be one more step, where NSIL or Antrix could be enabling that. That is one source of funding where developmental activity of technologies will be there. And then the third one, like I pointed out, that all the areas, even new problems, could be posed as developmental activities in the non-ISRO space, and through that also funding. So more and more the amount of development that is being spent on R&D, etc., there will be more co-passengers or collaborative efforts with the industry. So that is where the additional funding part will happen. But then the real challenge will be for the entrepreneurs to go beyond that. See, definitely, if they are able to, the success will come for those people who establish that they have a working model where they have got some revenue, and then using that, they're able to work on a specific problem and then take off. So that is where the real advantages will accrue.
Sir, we celebrate a lot of photographs from the 1970s, especially when you see the French photographer capturing some of the images today, that has circulated all over the social media and everything. So I wanted to know your perspective on allowing space historians. Recently, I had a conversation with a space historian who was talking about, how little archival information that it is available from India for a lot of space historians who are looking at space to document a lot of things. So do you foresee, of course, ISRO is a very technical organization. It has a lot of space related scientists. But today you have a lot of these interests from history, astrobiology, chemistry, so many other areas that are merging into space. How do you see ISRO opening up to these communities so that the public can access more information through this archiving process and inclusive process of them being in place, and also it allows people to cherish all the developments that have happened over time?
Yeah, actually, this is again one of the thing is like in general, it's a government policy with respect to the archived information, etc. But in general, if you see what ISRO does, most of the things are actually open literature in terms of projects, activities, etc. There is not much, but then probably what you are saying also refers to certain specific set of information, how things have got decided, how things have happened. That is where many of the historians are trying to do. And here I can only say that each specific case they'll have to approach, and unless the government of India, like many other Western scenarios, after 20 years or after 50 years, everything is available for open. If such decisions are taken, then only things might change. But otherwise, it will be based on the government policies that are existing at any given point of time.
Yeah. So also, the neighborhood in India is of course ripe for many of the applications that India has developed in space technology. How do you see? Of course, SARC satellite was one such example of the neighborhood using space from space-based technology from India. So do you see more geospatial applications, Navik and a few other applications evolve, for use based on the technology that has already come up in India?
Yeah, actually, really speaking, if you see today, there is really no constraint for the entrepreneurs to make use of these, whether it is geospatial data available from the Indian satellite systems, or today, for example, ISRO is also putting, whether it's MOSDAC, Vedas, Bowen, or any of these platforms, a lot of data is available. And then it is for the entrepreneurs to reach out to the different neighboring places and provide solutions to them using that. And currently, if you see, I'm sure the way the government is now looking at the problems, more and more open access is going to be available. And if some people quickly start doing this work, I'm sure they will succeed. And I really see a big opportunity here, both in terms of geospatial technology, whether it's Navik-based, Navik, Gagan, and then the geospatial data that is generated both from our own resources or even from what open sources is there, and the various examples of what has happened in the country. There is opportunity, and I am sure ISRO will promote to the extent it's always a question of individual approaches. There are always people who go out of the way to support. There will always be others for various reasons through their own experience, how things have happened. Some will be more conservative, but notwithstanding this, situation is ripe today for progressively venturing into those activities, both geospatial as well as communication-based solutions which can be provided.
There's always a tussle between security and making data available openly through ISRO satellites or so on. especially when it comes to high resolution imagery and making the applications of high resolution imagery happen. So do you see potentially a remote sensing policy coming into place that goes beyond the existing RSTP, where a lot of the geospatial applications can be unlocked? Because today, I think a large number of applications depend on Sentinel and Landsat and other open data from European and American sources. And from what I've seen with a lot of chat with local entrepreneurs in India, they would want to access more of ISRO data regularly with a higher refresh rate and more frequently in an easy fashion, like they would do with the Sentinel or other data. So how do you foresee this evolving?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, the government is in the process of looking at definitely making sure that this tussle between the security and the non-security issues, and how certain things, though it is not necessary under this affected. This, I'm definitely 100% certain that very quickly the scenario will change. And there's also another aspect what we need to see. Many times this is actually, the space technology is only one of the sources of generating data for various activities. The data itself, what is getting restricted from space for geospatial activities, should not be the entire thing. This geospatial activity can happen today if you look at whether it's, for example, very high resolution, near term, short term data can be collected with drones at much different, for smaller areas, whereas space definitely provides you on a continuous repetitive basis many things. For certain very high resolution, drone based acquisition are the solutions that many people are adopting as it progresses. But then here again, the scenario is expected to change very soon, and the distinction between space-based data collection versus non-space-based data collection, that conflict also should get resolved, and geospatial data access should be actually dealing from only the satellite data.
So the last question, so thank you very much for your time. There's a final question. So we always see, people quoting the space economy is $400 billion big, or, whatever big, so on. But unfortunately, I have not come across a single study that maps an Indian space economy. There was an attempt by U. Shankar that I have read, but we haven't really seen any progress on that. Do you see, ISRO conducting such studies on an annual basis, or having IIMs or IITs involved in conducting such a study that makes it very clear what opportunity for space economy in India, and making the data very local to India?
I think you have a very good point there, and then this again another specific effort which probably will have to be taken up on a rigorous basis, and then maybe task a few institutions across the country. They should come out with such reports, maybe on a yearly basis or on a biennial basis, etc., so that it becomes available. It definitely is a good approach. To a certain extent, something beyond this, not what ISRO itself has done, was attempted, but then this also is required to be done. And see, one of the real problems that country like our faces is, see, information is neutral. Actually, how that information gets used is the problem. And for the fear of that information being used in a particular manner, many activities do not happen. That is the scenario which the country has to come out of. And today, more and more such things are happening. And I'm sure this also will be another activity where the government will actually ensure that on a periodic basis, this will come out, and in open domain, the end result is available.
So thank you very much, sir. You've been very insightful and very open in your comments. So I thank you for your honesty and the comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And let me also compliment the Pathfinders for this kind of activity. Wish you a great success in your future activities. And then probably one of the suggestion is you should catch hold of some people from the private enterprise, even if they are a small group or a small entity, their success or failure or difficulties what they face, they should be able to communicate, because that will actually serve as lessons learned in the area. And today, if one of the things what ISRO has learned is, it is always through the problems, the failures, that you learn more and you find solution. And if we can actually bring in more and more such examples, of course, you also need to find a person who is ready to discuss his failure. That could be a challenge in itself. But then, notwithstanding that, one of the things could be how to leverage such discussions could be one of the areas in which you could attempt. So let me compliment you and wish you a great success in your future efforts. Thank you, Narayan Prasad, for that interaction. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that's a great suggestion. And I think one of the reasons we requested Narayan to do this moderation is also to get that cross-platform discussion. So thank you so much, sir. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Narayan, for a great moderation. And thank you, Kiran Kumar, sir, for such great insights. I can see, I'm sorry we couldn't answer all the questions because time constraints, but thank you so much, everyone. And our next session is on Indian education sector. So I think one of the things is it's a great continuation because the whole idea is starting science and technology very young in life. I think that's also a way of building the next generation entrepreneurs in these kind of sectors. So I think thank you so much, sir, for kicking us off today. And thank you everyone again for joining us and hope to see you next
Just
week.
one thing, one suggestion, maybe fireside chat, you should change the name.
Sure, sir, will do. Thank
We
you
can
so
come
much.
up with a better name for that.
So we're doing the
Thank you.
virtual fireside here, but thank you so much. Yes,
No, then you have to put behind in the screen a fire chat.
yes, we'll do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Narayan.
Thank you, everyone.
so much.
Take care.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.